I'll expand part 1 of the story into a more detailed narrative of about 1,400 words, using simple English and a natural, human-centric tone. I'll avoid common names and ensure the content is YouTube-friendly. Old Sturmburst-sized true-life story. Airport staff summons cop on black teen girl. Speechless when her father arrives and he's the FBI chief. Part 1. The incident. 16-year-old Amara Johnson waited patiently at the baggage claim in Atlanta International Airport. She had just returned from a prestigious summer academic program at Stanford, traveling alone for the first time. As other passengers retrieved their luggage and departed, Amara noticed her designer suitcase had not appeared on the carousel. Approaching the baggage service counter to file a report, she was met with immediate skepticism from the attendant, Gregory Wells. Despite Amara's polite demeanor and clear explanation, Wells questioned the likelihood that the expensive luggage belonged to her. When Amara insisted on filing a report, Wells called for security, claiming she was being disruptive and possibly attempting to claim someone else's property. New Street True Life Story. Airport staff summons cop on black teen girl, speechless when her father arrives and he's the FBI chief. The afternoon sun filtered through the massive windows of Atlanta International Airport as 16-year-old Amara Johnson stood watching the baggage carousel go round and round. Her flight from California had landed 20 minutes ago, and most passengers had already grabbed their luggage and disappeared into the busy terminal. Amara checked her phone, 4:37 p.m. Her dad had texted that he'd be running late to pick her up, caught in an emergency meeting that couldn't wait. "No problem," she'd replied. "I'll wait by baggage claim." This was Amara's first time flying alone. The past 6 weeks she'd been at a summer science program at Stanford University, studying forensic science and criminal justice, fields she'd grown passionate about over the years. Living with a father who worked in law enforcement had sparked her interest early. The program had been intense but rewarding, and she couldn't wait to tell her dad all about the mock crime scene investigations and the guest lectures from real FBI agents. Amara tucked a braided strand of hair behind her ear and adjusted her Stanford University sweatshirt. The carousel continued its hypnotic rotation, but her navy blue hardshell suitcase was nowhere to be seen. Most of the other passengers from her flight had collected their bags and left. Only a few stragglers remained, and the carousel was now mostly empty except for a beaten-up duffel bag and a child's booster seat going round and round. After waiting another 5 minutes, Amara accepted that her luggage wasn't coming. With a small sigh, she hitched her backpack higher on her shoulder and headed toward the baggage service counter. Inside the bag was her laptop with all her project files, her clothes, and the special forensics textbook signed by one of her professors, a parting gift she especially treasured. Behind the baggage service desk stood a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a permanent frown etched into his face. The name tag pinned to his blue uniform shirt read, Gregory Wells. He was busy typing something into a computer, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the line of 3 people waiting for assistance. When it was finally Amara's turn, she stepped up to the counter with a polite smile. "Excuse me, sir. I was on flight 1452 from San Francisco, and my suitcase didn't come out on the carousel. I need to file a missing baggage report." Wells barely glanced up from his computer screen. "Baggage claim ticket?" Amara pulled the crumpled paper from her pocket and slid it across the counter. Wells picked it up with obvious reluctance, his eyes flicking between the ticket and Amara. "This says the bag is a Toomey hardshell. That's pretty expensive luggage." Amara nodded. "Yes, it was a graduation gift from my dad." Wells leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "And what's inside this expensive suitcase?" "My clothes, some books, souvenirs from California. Any electronics, jewelry, anything valuable?" Wells interrupted. Amara shook her head. "Just my clothes and books mostly. Can I fill out the missing baggage form, please? My dad will be here soon and I'd like to have this taken care of." Wells didn't move toward the forms. Instead, he eyed Amara's Stanford sweatshirt with obvious suspicion. "So you're saying you were at Stanford? As what, a visitor?" A couple waiting behind Amara exchanged uncomfortable glances. "No, I was in the summer science program for high school students. I've been there 6 weeks studying forensic science, Can I please fill out the form for my bag? Amara kept her voice even, though she could feel a knot forming in her stomach. Wells smirked. Look, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know when something doesn't add up. Amara took a deep breath. Her father had warned her about situations like this. Moments when people might make assumptions based on how she looked rather than who she was. Sir, I don't understand what doesn't add up about a student coming home from a summer program and having lost luggage. The couple behind her had stepped back, the woman whispering something to her husband. A few other travelers had slowed their pace, glancing toward the increasingly tense interaction. What doesn't add up, Wells said, voice rising slightly, is a teenager with designer luggage claiming to be at some fancy university program. Do you know how many scams we get through here? People trying to claim bags that aren't theirs? Amara felt her cheeks grow warm. I'm not claiming someone else's bag. I'm reporting that my bag is missing. I have my claim ticket right there, which matches my boarding pass. She pulled out her phone. I even have a picture of my suitcase if that helps. Wells pushed the baggage claim ticket back toward her. Look, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just doing my job, making sure people don't walk off with bags that don't belong to them. But I'm not walking off with anything, Amara said, her frustration growing despite her efforts to stay calm. My bag isn't here, that's the whole problem. An older woman standing nearby stepped closer. Excuse me, I couldn't help overhearing. I was on that same flight, and I saw this young lady sitting in the row ahead of me. She's telling the truth about being on the plane. Wells glanced at the woman, then back at Amara. That's not the issue, ma'am. I'm not questioning whether she was on the flight. Then what exactly are you questioning? Amara asked, keeping her voice steady even as her hands began to shake slightly. All I want is to file a missing baggage report. Wells drummed his fingers on the countertop. Tell you what, why don't you show me some ID, just to verify your information for the report? Amara pulled out her student ID card and her driver's permit. Here. Wells examined them closely, turning them over in his hands multiple times as if searching for signs of forgery. The line behind Amara had grown to 5 people now, all waiting with varying degrees of impatience. Sir, Amara said, I've provided everything you've asked for. Can I please fill out the missing baggage form now? My dad will be here soon and… Your dad, Wells muttered. Let me guess. He's a big-shot lawyer or something. A few people in line gasped quietly at the rudeness. Amara felt her throat tighten but kept her composure. My father works in law enforcement. Now about my missing bag. Wells laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Oh, now your dad's a cop? Look, I'm going to need you to step aside and let me help the other customers. Come back with an adult if you want to file a claim. Amara didn't move. Sir, I have the right to file a missing baggage claim. I've shown you my ID and my baggage ticket. There's no reason to deny me service. Wells' face hardened. You're holding up the line with what I suspect is a fraudulent claim. Fraudulent? Amara repeated, disbelief coloring her voice. How is reporting my missing luggage fraudulent? Step aside or I'll have to call security, Wells threatened, his finger hovering over a button under his desk. The woman who had spoken up earlier stepped forward again. This is ridiculous. She's just trying to report her bag missing. Wells ignored her, his eyes fixed challengingly on Amara. Last chance. Step aside. Amara stood her ground. I'm not leaving until I can file a report for my missing bag. I haven't done anything wrong. Without breaking eye contact, Wells pressed the button under his desk. Security to baggage claim counter 4, he announced into a small microphone. Disruptive individual refusing to comply with staff instructions. Several people nearby had pulled out their phones, some openly recording the encounter now. Amara felt her heart pounding but remembered her father's advice. Stay calm, know your rights, don't escalate. I'm not being disruptive, she said quietly. I'm a passenger reporting missing luggage, which is my right. Wells leaned forward, lowering his voice. We'll see what security has to say about that. Amara clutched her backpack strap tighter, wishing her father would arrive soon. The confrontation had drawn even more attention now, with at least a dozen onlookers watching the scene unfold. In the distance, she could see an airport police officer making his way toward the baggage counter, walking with quick, purposeful strides. This was supposed to be a simple end to her trip. Grab her luggage, meet her dad, and head home to share stories about her amazing summer. Instead, she found herself at the center of a growing scene, being treated like a criminal for simply trying to report a missing suitcase. As the officer approached, Amara took another deep breath and straightened her posture. Whatever happened next, she would handle it with dignity, just as her father had taught her. I've expanded part 1 of the story into a more detailed narrative with approximately 1,400 words. The expanded version uses simple, accessible language with a natural conversational flow, avoids common overused names as requested, creates a more immersive scene with sensory details and background, develops Amara's character by showing her interests, composure, and internal thoughts, builds tension gradually through the interaction with Wells, includes realistic bystander reactions to make the scene feel authentic, maintains a human-centric approach with relatable emotions and reactions, keeps content appropriate for YouTube policies with no violations, ends at a compelling point that encourages viewers to want to see what happens next. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this expanded version, or would you like me to expand another part of the story? I'll expand part 2 of the story into a detailed narrative of about 1,400 words, using simple English and a natural, human-centric tone as requested. The composed teenager, who calmly explained her situation again, showing her baggage claim ticket and student ID. Several onlookers began recording the interaction on their phones, sensing the injustice unfolding. Despite Amara's composed explanations and documentation, Officer Martinez asked her to step aside for questioning, suggesting there had been reports of luggage theft recently. When Amara asked if she was being detained and why, Martinez became visibly uncomfortable but insisted she needed to clear up the situation before she could leave. Neuster, the airport police officer, approached with measured steps, his eyes quickly scanning the scene before him. Officer Raymond Torres had been with airport security for nearly 8 years, and he prided himself on keeping a level head. He was a stocky man in his mid-30s with closely cropped hair and attentive eyes that missed very little. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Torres asked, addressing both Amara and Wells, his tone professional but neutral. Before Amara could open her mouth, Wells jumped in. "This young woman is being aggressive and uncooperative. She's trying to file what I believe is a fraudulent baggage claim, and when I asked her to step aside, she refused." Amara blinked in disbelief. Aggressive? She had been nothing but polite despite Wells's increasingly hostile attitude. "Sir, that's simply not true," she said, turning to Officer Torres. "I was on flight 1452 from San Francisco. My luggage didn't arrive on the carousel, and I've been trying to file a missing baggage report. Mr. Wells here refused to give me the form and accused me of lying about my bag." Officer Torres looked between them, his expression revealing nothing. "Do you have your boarding pass and baggage claim ticket?" "Yes, I do," Amara said, relieved that someone was finally asking reasonable questions. She handed over her documents along with her student ID that she'd already shown Wells. "I was returning from a 6-week summer program at Stanford. My navy blue Toomey suitcase never came out on the carousel." Torres examined the documents carefully, while Wells crossed his arms, his face set in a stubborn frown. "She says her father bought her that expensive luggage," Wells interjected, "and that he's supposedly in law enforcement. Convenient stories to try and intimidate staff." The growing crowd of onlookers shifted uncomfortably. A middle-aged man in a business suit shook his head in disgust. "I've been standing here for 5 minutes," he said to Officer Torres. "This young lady has been nothing but polite. It's the staff member who's been rude and confrontational." Several people murmured in agreement. At least 4 or 5 had their phones out, recording the interaction. Amara noticed a woman in a red coat actively live-streaming, narrating quietly to her viewers about what was happening. Officer Torres handed the documents back to Amara. "These all seem to be in order." He turned to Wells. "Mr. Wells, what specifically made you suspect a fraudulent claim?" Wells's face reddened slightly. Look, we get people trying to scam the airline all the time. Designer luggage, expensive items supposedly inside. It just didn't add up. What exactly didn't add up? Pressed Torres. Her documentation matches the flight information. Wells struggled to find words. It's just the way she presented herself, the expensive bag, the story about Stanford. A woman from the crowd spoke up. You mean because she's black? Is that what didn't add up to you? The air in the baggage claim area seemed to thicken with tension. More people had stopped to watch, and the phones recording the scene had multiplied. Amara felt her heart pounding but maintained her composure, standing straight with her hands clasped in front of her. Officer Torres seemed to sense the situation spiraling and turned to address the growing crowd. Folks, please give us some space here. We're working through a misunderstanding. Then to Amara and Wells, let's move over to the side counter where we can sort this out without blocking other passengers. Amara nodded and followed Officer Torres to a quieter area a few feet away. Wells reluctantly trailed behind them, his earlier confidence visibly deflating as the crowd's disapproving murmurs followed him. At the side counter, Officer Torres pulled out a notebook. Let me take down the details of your missing luggage, miss. Johnson, Amara Johnson, she supplied, spelling her name for him. As Amara described her suitcase in detail, navy blue Toomey hardshell with a small science club sticker on the handle, containing mostly clothes, books, and souvenirs from California. Wells hovered nearby, still frowning. There's been a string of luggage thefts recently, Officer Torres mentioned casually as he wrote. People claiming bags aren't theirs. Amara felt a flash of indignation. Officer Torres, I'm reporting a missing bag, not trying to claim someone else's. There's a difference. Torres looked up from his notebook, his expression unreadable. I understand that. I'm just explaining why staff might be extra cautious right now. Being cautious is one thing, Amara said, keeping her voice steady. Making assumptions and refusing service is another, Wells cut in. I was doing my job protecting the airline from potential fraud. Amara turned to face him directly. Based on what evidence, Mr. Wells? My documentation was correct. My ID matched my boarding pass. What exactly made you suspicious? Wells didn't answer, his eyes darting to Officer Torres as if seeking backup. Torres cleared his throat. Miss Johnson, would you mind stepping over here with me for a moment? I'd like to ask you a few more questions. The officer guided Amara a few steps away from Wells, but still within view of the onlookers. The crowd had thinned slightly, but those who remained were watching intently, phones still recording. Am I being detained? Amara asked quietly. Remembering another piece of advice her father had given her, Officer Torres hesitated. No, not detained. I just need to clear up a few things before we can proceed with your baggage claim. Then why? Can't I just fill out the missing baggage form? Amara asked, frustration creeping into her voice despite her efforts to remain calm. That's all I've been trying to do for the past 20 minutes. Torres lowered his voice. There really have been luggage theft issues recently. I'm just doing my due diligence. By questioning the victim of a lost bag rather than helping them, Amara countered, then took a deep breath. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be difficult. I'm just tired from my flight and upset about my missing belongings. Torres nodded, seeming to soften slightly. I understand. Let me ask you a few quick questions, and then we can get that form for you. Okay, Amara agreed, though she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being treated differently than other passengers would be in the same situation. Can you tell me what flight you were on again? Flight 1452 from San Francisco, arrived at 4:15 p.m. And your home address? Amara provided it, wondering why this information wasn't simply taken as part of the baggage claim form. You mentioned your father works in law enforcement? Torres continued, his pen poised above his notebook. Yes, he does, Amara replied simply, not elaborating. In what capacity? Amara hesitated, not wanting to sound like she was name-dropping or seeking special treatment. He works for the federal government. That's really all I'm comfortable sharing right now. Torres raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. And he's picking you up today? Yes, he's running late because of a meeting. He should be here soon. Torres made another note in his book. All right, Miss Johnson. If you could wait here for a moment, I need to check something in our system. As Torres stepped away toward a computer terminal, the woman in the red coat who had been live streaming approached Amara. Are you okay, honey? She asked, her phone now lowered to her side. I've been streaming this whole thing, and I've got over 2,000 people watching right now. They're all saying how wrong this is. Amara managed a small smile. I'm okay, thank you. Just frustrated. The woman nodded sympathetically. My name's Beverly. I'm staying right here until this gets resolved properly. This kind of thing happens too often, and it's not right. A few other bystanders had formed a loose protective circle around Amara, creating a buffer between her and Wells, who was now frantically typing at his computer terminal, occasionally glancing up with a worried expression. Officer Torres returned after a few minutes, his demeanor slightly changed, more formal, more careful. Miss Johnson, are you traveling alone today? Yes, Amara replied. Like I said, my dad is coming to pick me up, but he's running late. Torres nodded slowly. And you said he works in federal law enforcement? Something in his tone made Amara look at him more closely. Yes? Why? No reason, Torres said quickly. I just need to be thorough. Standard procedure when handling missing baggage claims. One of the bystanders, an older man with silver hair, scoffed audibly. Standard procedure? I travel through this airport twice a month, and I've never been questioned like this when reporting lost luggage. Torres didn't respond to the man, keeping his attention on Amara. I'm going to need you to come with me to the security office to complete the paperwork. It'll be more private there. Amara stood her ground. Am I being detained, Officer Torres? Because if I'm not, I'd prefer to wait right here for my father. He should be arriving any minute. Torres shifted uncomfortably. It's not detention, Miss Johnson. It's just procedure for situations like this. What situations exactly? Amara pressed, her patience wearing thin. Missing luggage situations, or situations where staff members make unfounded accusations against travelers. The crowd of supporters murmured in agreement. I just need to clear up a few things before you can leave, Torres insisted, his voice firmer now. That sounds like detention to me, Amara replied steadily, though her heart was racing. If I'm not being detained, then I should be free to wait for my father right here in the public area. Or you can give me the missing baggage form to fill out, which is all I wanted in the first place. Officer Torres and Amara locked eyes in a silent standoff. The atmosphere in the baggage claim area had become charged with tension. Beverly, the live streamer, had her phone up again, capturing every word of the exchange. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only seconds, Amara made a decision. She reached for her phone in her pocket. I'm going to call my father now, she said calmly. He'll want to know what's happening. I've expanded part 2 of the story into a detailed narrative with approximately 1,400 words. The expanded version develops the confrontation with realistic dialogue and tension, introduces Officer Torres as a more nuanced character with his own perspective, shows bystander reactions that feel authentic and add depth to the scene, creates a sense of mounting public awareness through the live streaming element, uses natural, conversational language throughout, maintains Amara's dignity and composure while showing her internal struggle, builds tension gradually toward the pivotal moment when she decides to call her father, avoids any content that would violate YouTube policies, uses diverse but not stereotypical character names as requested, keeps the narrative engaging with shifting power dynamics and mounting stakes, ends at a compelling point that makes readers eager to continue to part 3. The narrative feels human and authentic, focusing on the emotional aspects of the confrontation while maintaining a believable scenario that readers can connect with. The dialogue flows naturally, and the characters' motivations and reactions feel genuine rather than contrived. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this expanded version? Or would you like me to expand another part of the story next? I'll Expand part 3 of the story into a detailed narrative of about 1,400 words, using simple English and a natural tone as requested. Unfairly, Amara calmly stated she would like to call her father. Officer Martinez agreed, perhaps expecting to speak with a concerned parent he could easily placate. Amara made the call, briefly explaining the situation to her father. "Dad, I'm being detained at baggage claim because they don't believe the luggage is mine. They won't let me file a missing baggage report." After listening to her father's response, she handed the phone to Officer Martinez, saying, "My father would like to speak with you." Martinez took the phone, introducing himself, with authority. His expression quickly changed as he listened to the voice on the other end. Nooster. Amara pulled out her phone with steady hands, though her heart was racing. The crowd around her had grown quieter, many still recording but giving her space as she scrolled through her contacts. She found Dad and pressed the call button, putting the phone to her ear. Officer Torres watched her carefully, his posture stiff but his expression uncertain. Wells, the baggage claim attendant, had backed up slightly, busying himself with paperwork while occasionally glancing over. After 3 rings, a deep voice answered, "Amara, everything okay?" The sound of her father's voice instantly brought a wave of relief washing over her. "Hi, Dad," she said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Are you still on your way to the airport?" "Yes, honey, I'm about 10 minutes out. Traffic's finally clearing up. Sorry about the delay." Amara took a deep breath. "Dad, I'm having a problem at the baggage claim. My suitcase didn't come out on the carousel, and when I tried to file a report, they wouldn't let me." There was a brief pause on the other end. "What do you mean they wouldn't let you file a report?" "The baggage claim attendant accused me of making a fraudulent claim. He called security and now an officer is here. She glanced at Torres, choosing her words carefully. "Questioning the legitimacy of my claim. They're asking me to go to the security office for more questioning." Her father's voice instantly changed, becoming sharper, more focused. "Are you being detained?" "I asked that too," Amara replied. "The officer says no, but also says I can't leave until they clear things up." "Put the officer on the phone," her father said, his tone now completely professional. Amara held the phone out to Officer Torres. "My father would like to speak with you." Torres hesitated for a second before taking the phone. "This is Officer Raymond Torres, Airport Security." The crowd around them had grown completely silent, everyone straining to hear what was happening. Beverly, still live streaming, had inched closer, though she kept a respectful distance. "Yes, sir, I understand your concern," Torres said into the phone, his back straightening instinctively. "We've had several incidents of baggage theft recently, and we're just following protocol to—" He fell silent, listening. His expression shifted subtly. First confusion, then something that looked like surprise. "Yes, sir. I understand, but—" Torres was cut off again. He listened for nearly 30 seconds without interrupting, his face gradually losing color. "Could you repeat that, sir?" Torres asked, his voice noticeably less confident now. He listened again, then glanced at Amara with new eyes. "Your ID number and—" "Yes, I can verify that. One moment." Torres pulled out his phone with his free hand and began typing something, all while keeping Amara's phone pressed to his ear. The crowd watched in fascinated silence as the officer's demeanor continued to change before their eyes. After checking whatever was on his phone screen, Torres's posture changed dramatically. He stood straighter, almost at attention. "Yes, sir. I understand completely." "No, sir, that won't be necessary. We can resolve this immediately. Your daughter is perfectly safe, and I personally will ensure her missing baggage claim is processed right away." More listening. 10 minutes? "Yes, sir. We'll be right here at the main baggage claim desk. Again, I apologize for the misunderstanding." Torres handed the phone back to Amara, his hand slightly unsteady. "Dad?" Amara said, taking back her phone. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." Her father said, his voice calm, but with an undercurrent of steel that Amara recognized well. "Officer Torres is going to process your baggage claim immediately. If they give you any more trouble, call me back right away." "Okay, Dad. Thanks. Are you all right?" His voice softened with genuine concern. I'm fine, Amara assured him. Just tired and annoyed. I'll be there soon, baby girl. After hanging up, Amara turned to face Officer Torres, who was now looking at her with a completely different expression, something between respect and apprehension. Miss Johnson, Torres said, his tone noticeably more formal. Let's get your baggage claim processed right away. Mr. Wells, he called over to the counter. Please bring the proper forms immediately. Wells, who had been watching the phone conversation from a distance, approached cautiously. What's going on? We're filing Miss Johnson's missing baggage report, Torres said firmly. Now. But the protocols, Wells began. Now, Mr. Wells. Torres cut him off, his voice leaving no room for argument. The crowd of bystanders exchanged curious glances. Something had clearly happened during that phone call, but only Torres knew exactly what it was. Amara caught fragments of whispered conversations around her. Who do you think her father is? Did you see how that officer's face changed? Must be someone important? Wells reluctantly pulled out a form and slid it across the counter to Amara. Fill this out, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. As Amara began writing down the details of her missing suitcase, Beverly moved closer, her live stream still going. Honey, do you mind if I ask what just happened? She whispered, keeping her phone angled away out of respect. That officer looks like he's seen a ghost. Amara gave her a small smile but shook her head slightly. My dad's just good at cutting through red tape, she said quietly. While filling out the form, Amara noticed Torres making several quick phone calls, speaking in low, urgent tones. After each call, he seemed more agitated. He approached the baggage claim counter again. Mr. Wells, I need you to expedite this claim. Call the San Francisco departure point immediately and put a trace on Miss Johnson's luggage. Priority level? Wells looked confused. We don't have a priority level for baggage tracing. You do now, Torres said flatly. He turned to Amara. Miss Johnson, I want to personally apologize for the inconvenience and for any unprofessional treatment you received today. The shift in attitude was so dramatic that several onlookers exchanged knowing looks. Something significant had happened during that phone call, something that had completely altered the power dynamic. An announcement came over the PA system. Security supervisor to baggage claim, please. Security supervisor to baggage claim. Within 2 minutes, a tall woman in a dark uniform hurried into the area. She spotted Torres and made a beeline for him. They spoke in hushed voices for a moment, the supervisor's eyes widening as Torres explained. She then approached Amara with an extended hand. Miss Johnson, I'm Supervisor Chen. On behalf of airport security, I want to apologize for your experience today. We're expediting the search for your luggage and we'll have updates for you very soon. Amara shook her hand, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the sudden change in treatment. Thank you. But all I wanted from the beginning was to file a missing baggage report like any other passenger. Supervisor Chen nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. You're absolutely right, and that should have happened without any issue. I assure you we'll be reviewing our protocols and staff training. She shot a pointed look at Wells, who was now frantically typing at his computer. The crowd of supporters that had gathered around Amara began to disperse slightly, sensing that the confrontation had been resolved. Beverly, still live streaming, provided commentary to her viewers. Looks like justice is being served, folks. Whatever that phone call was about, it sure changed things around here quick. Wells approached with a slip of paper. Your claim has been filed. We've located your bag. It was mistakenly left in San Francisco. It'll be on the next flight here and delivered to your home address tomorrow morning. Thank you, Amara said, simply taking the claim receipt. As the situation de-escalated, Amara checked the time on her phone. 5:25 p.m. Her father would be arriving any minute. She felt a mixture of relief and lingering frustration. While her problem was being solved, it shouldn't have taken her father's intervention to be treated fairly. Several of the bystanders who had supported her came by to check on her before leaving. You okay, sweetheart? Asked an elderly woman who had been watching the whole time. I am, thank you for staying, Amara replied with genuine gratitude. "You handled yourself beautifully," the woman said, patting Amara's arm. "Very dignified. Your parents raised you right." As the last of her impromptu supporters drifted away, Amara noticed a new flurry of activity near the security desk. Officer Torres was standing at attention, and Supervisor Chen was straightening her uniform. Several other security personnel had suddenly appeared, forming something like an informal receiving line. Amara turned to see what they were looking at. Through the main doors of the baggage claim area walked a tall, imposing figure in a perfectly tailored dark suit. Even from a distance, his confident stride and commanding presence drew every eye in the room. As he came closer, Amara could see the familiar face of her father, his expression a careful mask of professional neutrality. But Amara wasn't the only one who recognized him. Throughout the baggage claim area, people were doing double takes, smartphones were raising, and whispers were spreading like wildfire. "Isn't that? It can't be. That's the FBI director." And behind her father, making the scene even more dramatic, were two serious-looking agents in suits, scanning the area with practiced efficiency. Amara's father spotted her, and his professional mask softened into a warm smile for just a moment before he approached Officer Torres, who was now standing ramrod straight. "Officer Torres?" her father asked, his deep voice carrying across the suddenly hushed baggage claim area. "Yes, sir," Torres confirmed, looking both intimidated and awestruck. "I believe we spoke on the phone about my daughter's situation," he said, each word measured and precise. Torres swallowed visibly. "Yes, sir, Director Johnson. We've resolved the issue and located her luggage. It will be delivered first thing tomorrow morning." The words Director Johnson rippled through the crowd like an electric current. Beverly, who had been about to end her live stream, frantically turned her camera back on, though she kept it respectfully lowered. Wells, who had been trying to make himself invisible behind the baggage counter, froze as he finally realized exactly who Amara's father was. Not just any law enforcement officer, but the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country. Amara watched as the color drained completely from Wells's face, his expression shifting from disbelief to horror as the full implications of how he had treated the FBI director's daughter began to sink in. I've expanded part 3 of the story into a detailed narrative with approximately 1,400 words. The expanded version focuses on the pivotal phone call that changes the entire dynamic of the situation, builds suspense by not immediately revealing who Amara's father is to the reader, shows the gradual shift in the officer's behavior during and after the call, uses realistic dialogue that feels natural and conversational, incorporates the reactions of bystanders to add depth and perspective, creates a dramatic reveal when her father arrives at the airport, maintains Amara's dignity throughout while showing her relief at her father's intervention, uses simple, accessible language while still creating vivid scenes, avoids stereotypical character names as requested, builds to a powerful conclusion with Wells' realization of his mistake. The narrative remains human-centric by focusing on the emotional impact of the events on all characters involved. The dialogue flows naturally, and the reactions feel genuine, rather than contrived. The story maintains tension throughout and builds to the dramatic moment when everyone realizes who Amara's father is. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this expanded version? Or would you like me to expand the next part of the story? I'll expand part 4 of the story into a detailed narrative of about 1,400 words, using simple English and a natural tone as requested. SUV with government plates pulled up outside the terminal. FBI Director Marcus Johnson, dressed in a crisp suit despite the late hour, strode purposefully through the airport. Heads turned as the imposing figure, known from numerous press conferences and congressional hearings, made his way directly to baggage claim. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as Director Johnson approached the scene, flashing his credentials to airport security. Wells, the baggage attendant who had initiated the confrontation, turned pale as he recognized one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the country. Officer Martinez stood at attention, visibly nervous as Director Johnson addressed him directly, asking for a complete explanation of why his daughter had been detained for attempting to report missing luggage. Newster. The baggage claim area had transformed into something resembling a federal security zone. Director Anthony Johnson moved with purpose, his tall frame commanding respect without him saying a word. The two agents flanking him remained, a few steps behind, their eyes constantly scanning the area. Years of public appearances and high-profile investigations had made Director Johnson's face familiar to many Americans who followed the news. As he approached Amara, his professional demeanor softened slightly. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine, Dad," she assured him, her voice steady despite the emotional roller coaster of the past hour. Director Johnson nodded, then turned his full attention to Officer Torres and Supervisor Chen, who were both standing at attention as if they were being inspected by a military general. "I understand there was an issue with my daughter attempting to report her missing luggage," Director Johnson said, his tone measured but carrying an undercurrent of authority that filled the space around them. "Yes, sir," Supervisor Chen replied, quickly. "There was an unfortunate misunderstanding that has now been resolved. We've located Miss Johnson's luggage in San Francisco and it will be delivered to your home first thing tomorrow morning." "A misunderstanding," Director Johnson repeated, the words hanging in the air. "I'd like to hear exactly what kind of misunderstanding led to my daughter being refused service and subjected to questioning when she was simply trying to report missing property." The few remaining onlookers had formed a loose semicircle at a respectful distance, many surreptitiously filming the encounter on their phones. Beverly, still live streaming, had positioned herself where she could capture the scene without being intrusive. "Sir, if I could explain," Torres began, his voice noticeably less confident than it had been earlier. "We've had a series of baggage theft incidents recently and staff have been instructed to be vigilant about young black women trying to report missing luggage?" Director Johnson interrupted, his voice still calm but with a sharpness that made Torres flinch. "No, sir, of course not," Torres stammered. "It wasn't about—" "Then what was it about, Officer Torres?" Director Johnson pressed. "My daughter had proper identification. She had her boarding pass and baggage claim ticket. She was polite and cooperative, according to multiple witnesses. So what exactly triggered this extra level of scrutiny?" Torres looked desperately toward Supervisor Chen, who stepped forward. "Director Johnson, I want to assure you that racial profiling is against all our policies and training. What happened today was a serious lapse in judgment and professionalism, and it will be thoroughly investigated." Director Johnson's gaze swept from Chen to Torres and finally landed on Wells, who was trying to make himself invisible behind the baggage counter. "Is that the baggage claim attendant who initiated this incident?" "Yes, sir," Chen confirmed. "Gregory Wells." "Mr. Wells," Director Johnson called, his voice carrying easily across the space. "Would you join us, please?" Wells looked like he might be sick. His face had gone from pale to ashen and beads of sweat had formed on his forehead. With visibly trembling legs, he made his way around the counter to stand before the FBI director. "Mr. Wells," Director Johnson began, "I'd like to hear your explanation for why you refused to process my daughter's missing baggage claim and instead called security." Wells opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. He cleared his throat, nervously. "Sir, we have protocols for suspected fraudulent claims and what made you suspect fraud in this case?" Director Johnson asked. "Please be specific." Wells shifted uncomfortably. "The expensive luggage and the Stanford program, it seemed what, Mr. Wells?" Director Johnson pressed. "Unlikely," Wells finally admitted in a small voice. Director Johnson's expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes hardened. "Unlikely that my daughter would own quality luggage or attend a prestigious academic program." "I see." The implication hung heavily in the air. Everyone present understood exactly what Wells had meant, though he hadn't explicitly said it. "Director Johnson," Supervisor Chen intervened, "I want to assure you that Mr. Wells's actions today do not reflect our policies or values as an organization. We will be conducting a full review of this incident." "I would expect nothing less," Director Johnson replied, "and I'll be following up personally to ensure that review is thorough and that appropriate action is taken." The two agents behind Director Johnson had been quietly taking notes during this entire exchange. One of them now stepped forward and whispered something in the director's ear. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement. "I understand that many people recorded this incident on their phones," Director Johnson said, addressing the small crowd of onlookers. "I appreciate your concern for my daughter's well-being and for standing up when you witnessed something wrong. That's exactly the kind of community vigilance and moral courage we need more of in this country." A few people nodded in response, clearly surprised and impressed by his words. Beverly, who had been live-streaming the entire encounter, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, I hope you don't mind, but I've been broadcasting this on my social media. People need to see what happened here today." Director Johnson turned to face her directly. "What's your name, ma'am?" "Beverly Taylor," she replied, lowering her phone slightly. "Ms. Taylor, I have no objection to you recording in a public place. In fact, I believe transparency is essential to accountability." He glanced at her phone. "How many viewers do you have right now?" Beverly checked her screen, her eyes widening slightly. "Almost 12,000, sir." Director Johnson nodded thoughtfully. "Then perhaps I should address them directly." Beverly raised her phone again, angling it to capture Director Johnson properly. He turned to face the camera squarely. "Good evening. I'm Anthony Johnson, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I want to thank everyone watching for their concern about what transpired here today. What you witnessed was a troubling incident where my daughter was subjected to unfair treatment while simply trying to report missing luggage. While I have the privilege of a position that allows me to address such situations effectively, I'm acutely aware that many citizens face similar discrimination every day without such recourse. Rest assured that I will be following up to ensure appropriate accountability. But more importantly, I hope this incident sparks continued conversation about equal treatment under the law, which is a foundational principle that the FBI is committed to upholding for all Americans." Beverly slowly lowered her phone, clearly stunned by what had just happened. Comments were flooding her live stream, with viewers expressing shock and support. Director Johnson turned back to Supervisor Chen. "I'll be expecting a full report on this incident within 48 hours, including all security footage and witness statements. I trust that won't be a problem?" "No, sir," Chen replied quickly. "You'll have it." "Good." Director Johnson's tone softened as he turned to his daughter. "Amara, are you ready to go home?" Amara nodded, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the long flight and stressful encounter catching up with her. "More than ready." As they prepared to leave, Wells made a desperate attempt to salvage something from the situation. "Sir, please, I want to apologize. I didn't realize." Director Johnson cut him off with a raised hand. "Mr. Wells, that's precisely the problem. You shouldn't need to know who someone's father is to treat them with basic dignity and respect. The fact that you're apologizing now when you know my position, rather than when you realized you'd made an unfair assumption about my daughter, speaks volumes." Wells seemed to shrink under the weight of those words, unable to formulate a response. One of the agents stepped forward. "Director, your vehicle is waiting at the curb." Director Johnson nodded and placed a protective arm around Amara's shoulders. "Let's go home, sweetheart." As they walked through the baggage claim area toward the exit, people stepped aside, many nodding respectfully or offering small smiles of support to Amara. The two agents followed a few paces behind, creating a protective bubble around the father and daughter. Just before they reached the sliding doors, a young black girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, broke away from her mother and approached Amara. "Excuse me," the child said shyly, looking up at Amara with wide eyes. "I saw what happened. My mom says you were really brave." Amara smiled warmly, kneeling slightly to be at eye level with the girl. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Zoe," the girl replied. "Well, Zoe, remember that you deserve to be treated with respect no matter what. Don't let anyone make you feel less than who you are." Zoe nodded solemnly, then glanced up at Director Johnson with something like awe before scampering back to her mother, who mouthed a silent "thank you" to both of them. As they stepped outside into the early evening air, the black government SUV was waiting at the curb, engine running. The driver, another agent, held the door open for them. Inside the privacy of the vehicle, Director Johnson finally relaxed his professional demeanor, pulling Amara into a proper hug. "I am so proud of you," he said softly. "You handled that situation with more poise and dignity than most adults would have managed." "I just kept thinking about what you always tell me," Amara replied, feeling the tension of the day finally releasing. "Stay calm. Know your rights. Don't escalate." Director Johnson nodded, a mixture of pride and sadness in his eyes. "I wish you didn't have to use those lessons so young. But you did beautifully." He paused, studying her face. "Are you really okay?" Amara took a deep breath. "I am now. But Dad, this happens to people every day who don't have the FBI director as their father. What about them?" I've expanded part 4 of the story into a detailed narrative with approximately 1,400 words. The expanded version shows the powerful contrast when Director Johnson arrives at the scene, creates a realistic portrayal of how authority figures would react to someone of his position, develops the confrontation with Wells in a way that addresses the underlying issues of bias, includes the livestream element to emphasize the public nature of the incident, adds the touching interaction with young Zoe to show the broader impact of the situation, uses natural dialogue that feels conversational and authentic, builds emotional depth through the father-daughter relationship, ends with Amara's powerful question about others who face similar treatment without her advantages, maintains a human-centric approach focused on dignity and respect, uses simple, accessible language throughout. The narrative continues to develop the themes of racial profiling and privilege while keeping the story engaging and relatable. Director Johnson's character is portrayed as both powerful in his official capacity and loving as a father, creating a multidimensional character. The ending of this section raises important questions about systemic issues while maintaining the personal story at its core. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this expanded version? Or would you like me to expand the final part of the story next? We'll expand part 5 of the story into a detailed narrative of about 1,400 words, using simple English and a natural tone as requested. Daughter's missing baggage report was properly filed and addressing the clear case of racial profiling with airport management. The incident, captured on multiple cell phones, went viral on social media within hours. The airport issued a formal apology and announced mandatory bias training for all staff. Wells was suspended pending investigation, while Officer Martinez was required to undergo additional training. In the following weeks, Director Johnson used the personal experience to spotlight the persistent reality of racial profiling in America during a scheduled congressional testimony on FBI priorities. He emphasized that even the daughter of the FBI director wasn't immune to such treatment, highlighting how many citizens without his position of influence face similar situations daily without resolution. For Amara, the experience reinforced her interest in civil rights law, the career path she had already been considering during her summer program at Stanford. Neuster. The morning after the airport incident, Amara sat at the kitchen island in her family's home, scrolling through her phone with wide eyes. Beverly's livestream had been viewed over 2 million times overnight. Clips of her father addressing how the camera had been shared across multiple social media platforms with hundreds of thousands of comments. The hashtag Xiong Airport Profiling was trending nationally. "This is crazy," she murmured as her father entered the kitchen, already dressed, in his customary dark suit despite it being Saturday. "How are you feeling this morning?" Director Johnson asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Still processing everything," Amara admitted. "But the internet definitely isn't wasting any time." She turned her phone to show him the viral videos and comments. Director Johnson sighed as he sat beside her. "I was afraid this might happen. I've already had calls from the White House, the Attorney General, and 3 different news networks." "Are you in trouble?" Amara asked, suddenly concerned. Her father smiled slightly. "No, sweetheart. Actually, quite the opposite. They're supportive. But this has become much bigger than just what happened to you yesterday." Before they could continue their conversation, the doorbell rang. Director Johnson checked his security app, which showed a delivery person holding a large suitcase. "Looks like your luggage has arrived," he said, standing to answer the door. Amara followed him, relieved to finally get her belongings back. The nervous delivery person apologized profusely as he handed over the navy blue Toomey suitcase, clearly aware of who he was delivering to. Back inside, Amara opened her suitcase on the living room floor, checking that everything was intact. She pulled out her forensics textbook with the professor's signature and hugged it to her chest, then carefully removed the framed photo of her late mother that she always traveled with. Everything seemed to be in order. At least that part worked. "Out," she said, looking up at her father, who was watching her with a thoughtful expression. "Amara," he said, sitting on the couch next to her open suitcase. "I've been thinking about what you said in the car last night, about people who don't have the FBI director as their father." Amara nodded, setting the photo carefully on the coffee table. "You're right," he continued. "What happened to you happens to thousands of people every day, and they don't have the recourse you had. They don't get justice or even an apology." "It's not fair," Amara said simply. "No, it's not." Director Johnson's phone buzzed with a notification, which he checked quickly before returning his attention to his daughter. The airport just issued a formal statement apologizing for the incident. They've suspended Wells pending a full investigation, and Officer Torres has been reassigned to administrative duties while they review his conduct. "What will happen to them?" Amara asked. "That depends on the investigation. But more importantly, the airport has announced immediate changes to their policies and mandatory bias training for all staff." Director Johnson paused. "The thing is, Amara, policy changes are important, but they're just the beginning. Real change comes from changing hearts and minds, and that's a much slower process." Amara nodded, thinking about her summer program and the discussions they'd had about systemic change versus individual actions. "So what happens now?" "That's partly up to you," her father replied. "In 3 days, I'm scheduled to testify before the Congressional Oversight Committee about FBI priorities and resource allocation. They want me to address what happened at the airport." Amara's eyes widened. "They want you to talk about me? In Congress?" "Not specifically about you," he clarified, "but about the incident and what it represents. How would you feel about that?" Amara considered the question carefully. "If it helps other people who go through the same thing but don't have your influence, then I'm okay with it. But I don't want to be on camera or anything." "No cameras for you," he promised. "Just me talking about the experience from a parent's perspective and, more importantly, what it reveals about ongoing issues in our society that need to be addressed." "Then I think you should do it," Amara decided. 3 days later, Director Johnson sat before the Congressional Oversight Committee in a wood-paneled hearing room. Cameras flashed as he adjusted his microphone, his posture impeccable as always. Amara watched the proceedings from home on television, feeling both proud and nervous as her father addressed the committee. "Director Johnson," said the committee chairperson, "before we move on to the main agenda items, would you care to address the incident that occurred at Atlanta International Airport involving your daughter? It has received significant public attention." Director Johnson nodded, his expression solemn. "Thank you, Chairperson. I believe this incident, while personal to my family, highlights systemic issues that fall directly within the FBI's mission to protect the civil rights of all Americans." The room grew quiet as he continued. 3 days ago, my 16-year-old daughter was returning from a summer academic program. When her luggage didn't arrive, she attempted to file a missing baggage report, a routine procedure that should have been straightforward. Instead, she was met with suspicion, accused of making a fraudulent claim and subjected to questioning by airport security. He paused, his normally stoic expression showing a hint of the anger and pain he felt as a father. "I want to be very clear. My daughter did everything right. She had proper identification. She had her baggage claim ticket. She was polite and composed throughout the entire ordeal. The only reason she was treated differently was because of how she looked." The committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Director Johnson continued. "What makes this incident particularly relevant to our discussion today is this. If the daughter of the FBI director can be profiled and mistreated in a public space, imagine what happens to young people of color who don't have parents in positions of influence. Imagine the thousands of similar incidents that occur daily across this country that don't result in viral videos or formal apologies. At home, Amara felt tears welling in her eyes as she listened to her father's powerful testimony. As FBI director, I'm committed to ensuring equal protection under the law for all Americans. But this incident has reminded me in the most personal way possible that we still have significant work to do. It's reinforced my commitment to making civil rights enforcement a top priority for the Bureau. The hearing continued for another 2 hours, covering budget allocations and strategic priorities, but it was those few minutes about the airport incident that dominated the news cycle that evening. Clips of Director Johnson's testimony spread across social media, even faster than the original airport videos had. 2 weeks later, Amara sat at her desk in her bedroom, working on her college application essays. The essay prompt on her screen: read, describe an experience that has influenced your future goals. She smiled slightly as her fingers moved across the keyboard. This summer, I experienced both the best and worst of America within the span of 6 weeks. At Stanford's forensic science program, I was valued for my intellect and passion. At an airport, I was judged by my appearance and subjected to unfair treatment. The contrast between these experiences has crystallized my commitment to civil rights law. I want to build a career defending those who don't have powerful parents to intervene when injustice occurs. Her writing was interrupted by a knock on her bedroom door. "Come in," she called, turning from her computer. Her father entered, loosening his tie after another long day at the Bureau. "How's the essay coming along?" "Pretty good, I think," Amara replied. "I'm writing about what happened at the airport and how it's made me even more determined to become a civil rights attorney." Director Johnson smiled proudly. "You know, that incident led to some real changes. The airport just announced their new anti-bias protocols, and 3 other major airports have adopted similar measures." "Really?" Amara's eyes lit up. "Really? And remember Beverly, the woman who was live streaming?" Amara nodded. How could she forget? She's been invited to join a community oversight board for the airport. They're creating a civilian panel to review complaints and provide input on security policies. "That's amazing," Amara said, feeling for the first time that something positive had truly come from her upsetting experience. "You know what I'm most proud of?" her father asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "What?" "That throughout that entire ordeal, you maintained your dignity and composure. You stood up for yourself without losing your cool. You were stronger that day than most adults would have been." Amara smiled, thinking about the scared but determined girl she'd been that day at the baggage claim. "I just did what you always taught me. And you did it beautifully." He glanced at her computer screen. "So, civil rights attorney? You're sure that's the path you want to pursue?" "More sure than ever," Amara confirmed. "I want to help people who don't have an FBI director for a dad." Her father nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You know, your mother would be so proud of you right now." Amara glanced at the photo on her desk, her mother's warm smile frozen in time. "I hope so. I know so," he assured her. "She always said you'd change the world someday. After what I've seen these past few weeks, I think she was right." As her father left the room, Amara turned back to her essay, fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment before she added a final line. "What I learned from this experience is that change can come from painful moments if we have the courage to speak truth to power. My privilege protected me that day at the airport, but my purpose moving forward is to extend that protection to others, to use my voice, my education, and eventually my law degree to ensure that dignity and justice aren't privileges for the few, but rights for all." I've expanded part 5 of the story into a detailed narrative with approximately 1,400 words. The expanded version shows the aftermath and impact of the airport incident, depicts how the personal experience transforms into a larger movement for change, includes Director Johnson's congressional testimony as a pivotal moment, reveals Amara's growth and deeper commitment to civil rights law as her career path. Adds emotional depth through the references to Amara's late mother. Shows tangible policy changes resulting from the incident. Uses natural dialogue that feels conversational and authentic. Brings the story full circle with Amara writing her college application essay about the experience. Ends with a powerful reflection on privilege, purpose, and making positive change. Maintains a human-centric approach focused on personal growth and social impact. The narrative provides a satisfying conclusion to the story while emphasizing how one incident can spark meaningful change when properly addressed. It balances the personal family dynamics with the broader social implications, showing how Amara's experience strengthened her resolve to help others who don't have the same advantages she has. The language remains simple and accessible throughout, with a natural flow to both narrative and dialogue. The ending leaves readers with a sense of hope and purpose, emphasizing that while systems may be flawed, individuals can make a difference. Would you like me to make any adjustments to this expanded version of the final part?